Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Liberty and watched Earth burn. The blue planet that had been home to 12 billion people now glowed red with fire and destruction. Crimson ships filled the space around it like angry wasps around a broken hive. The Zephyrian Empire had come to take what they wanted, and they did not care who died in the process. Amy Rodriguez looked up from her control station with tears in her eyes. The young lieutenant had lost her family on Earth just 3 days ago when the alien ships first appeared. Now she was one of the lucky few aboard the last colony ship to escape the system. Her hands shook as she read the damage reports coming, and from other human vessels that had not been so fortunate. The Liberty shuddered as another explosion lit up the darkness behind them. Another human ship had just died trying to cover their escape. Jake closed his eyes for a moment and tried to push down the rage that threatened to overwhelm him. He had been a captain in the Earth Defense Force for 15 years. He had fought pirates and raiders and thought he knew what war looked like. But this was not war. This was extermination. Carl Bennett worked frantically in the engine room far below the bridge. The chief engineer had gray hair and calloused hands from 30 years of keeping spaceships running. Right now, he was pushing the Liberty's engines harder than they had ever been pushed before. The quantum drives were running at 112% capacity, and the warning lights flashed red all around him. But they needed every bit of speed they could get if they wanted to reach the jump point before the Zephyrian fighters caught up. The alien ships were faster than anything humans had ever built. Their weapons could punch through the strongest armor like it was paper. Their shields could stop anything the human fleet could throw at them. In 3 days, they had destroyed every orbital defense platform around Earth and scattered the mighty Earth Defense Force like leaves in a storm. Now the survivors ran for their lives while their homeworld died behind them. Jake had seen the reports from the colonies that fell first. The aliens did not want to rule humanity. They did not want slaves or tribute or surrender. They wanted humans gone completely. Men, women, and children were all targets. The Zephyrians moved from world to world like a plague, burning everything in their path. No one knew why they hated humans so much or what had started this war. All anyone knew was that humanity was losing badly. Amy's voice cracked as she gave another report. "Captain, we have 17 more ships on long-range sensors. They are heading for the Centauri colonies." Jake nodded grimly. The aliens were being thorough. They would not be satisfied until they had hunted down every last human settlement in known space. The Liberty and the few other ships that had escaped Earth were probably the largest group of survivors left alive. Down in the passenger decks, thousands of people tried to come to terms with what had happened. Lisa Turner moved through the crowded corridors, offering what comfort she could. She had been a teacher on Earth before the invasion. Now she found herself trying to explain to children why they could never go home again. Some of the younger ones did not understand. They asked when the trip would be over and when they could see their friends again. Lisa did not have the heart to tell them the truth. In the medical bay, Dr. Kevin Shaw worked to save the wounded refugees they had picked up from destroyed ships. Many had burns from energy weapons. Others had been hurt when their vessels were torn apart by alien fire. The doctor had studied Zephyrian technology from the wreckage of their battles, but he still did not understand how their weapons worked. The energy signatures were unlike anything in human science. It was as if the aliens used physics that humans had not even discovered yet. The Liberty's sensors picked up another group of fleeing ships near the edge of the system. Jake ordered a course change to intercept them. Every human life they could save might matter in the days to come. The small convoy included 2 cargo ships and a passenger liner that had somehow survived the destruction of Mars colony. Their captains reported that the red planet was gone. Nothing remained but glowing debris and radiation. Carl Bennett called up from engineering with more bad news. The quantum drives were starting to overheat. They could maintain this speed for maybe 6 more hours before the engines would shut down automatically to prevent an explosion. Jake did the math in his head. 6 hours would get them to the jump point with maybe 30 minutes to spare. It would have to be enough. Amy detected movement on the long-range scanners. 3 Zephyrian destroyers had broken off from the main fleet and were pursuing them. The alien ships were still 8 hours behind, but they were gaining ground slowly. Jake felt his stomach tighten. if they could not jump to hyperspace before those destroyers caught up the Liberty, and everyone aboard would die. The next few hours passed in tense silence. Jake paced the bridge while Amy monitored their pursuers, and Carl coaxed every bit of power he could from the struggling engines. The other survivors stayed quiet in their quarters and tried not to think about what would happen if the aliens caught them. Some prayed to whatever gods they believed in. Others just held their loved ones close and tried to find comfort in each other. Finally, Amy announced that they had reached the jump point. The Liberty and its convoy of refugee ships prepared to leave the Sol system forever. Jake looked back, one last time at the red glow that had once been Earth. Somewhere in that fire and destruction lay the graves of everyone he had ever known. His parents, his friends, his old crew members, all gone in 3 days of alien fury. But they were not beaten yet. As long as humans still lived somewhere in the galaxy, there was hope. The Liberty jumped into hyperspace, carrying 40,000 survivors toward an uncertain future. Behind them, Earth continued to burn, but ahead lay the possibility of a new beginning. The Zephyrians had taken their home, but they had not taken their spirit. That would prove to be their biggest mistake. 5 years had passed since the flames of Earth went dark. The colony ship Liberty sat on the surface of Kepler 442b, like a metal mountain in the middle of a hostile wilderness. Around it, the settlement of New Haven spread across the rocky plains. In a collection of prefab domes and underground tunnels, 40,000 humans now called this harsh world home, though none of them had chosen to be here. Lisa Turner walked through the main corridor of the Colony Administration Center and checked the daily reports. The news was never good on Kepler 442b. The atmosphere was poison without a breathing mask. The local wildlife included pack hunters with razor teeth and acid spit. The soil was so poor that growing food required constant chemical treatment. Every day was a struggle just to stay alive. But humans were stubborn creatures. They had learned to filter the toxic air and turn it into something they could breathe. They had built walls to keep out the predators and guns to kill the ones that got through. They had found ways to make the dead soil bloom with earth crops. It was hard work, and many people had died learning these lessons, but the colony was still growing. Dr. Kevin Shaw spent most of his time deep underground in the research labs that honeycombed the rock beneath New Haven. The facilities looked nothing like the clean white laboratories of old Earth. Everything was built from salvaged parts and held together with improvised solutions. But somehow they worked. Shaw and his team had been studying fragments of Zephyrian technology for 3 years now, and they were finally starting to understand how it functioned. The alien devices used quantum field manipulation in ways that human science had never imagined. Their weapons did not just fire energy beams. They actually tore holes in the fabric of space itself and let destructive forces pour through. Their shields worked by creating probability fields that made incoming attacks less likely to hit their targets. It was physics that bordered on magic, but Shaw was determined to unlock its secrets. Maria Santos led her scout team through the canyon maze 20 kilometers south of the colony. The former supply officer had become New Haven's chief explorer and survival trainer. She taught colonists how to move through the dangerous terrain without being detected by the native predators. More importantly, she taught them how to fight, back when hiding was not enough. The scouts had mapped most of the continent over the past 5 years. They had found deposits of rare minerals that could be used to build better equipment. They had discovered underground water sources that could supply the colony for decades. They had also found the ruins of an ancient civilization that had lived on this world millions of years ago. The aliens who built those ruins were long dead, but their technology might still be useful. In the colony's main meeting hall, debates raged every night about what humanity should do next. Some people like Peter Hughes believed they should keep hiding and building their strength. The former fighter pilot had become a voice for those who wanted to prepare for war. He argued that the Zephyrians would eventually find New Haven, and when they did, the colonists had better be ready to fight. But others like Helen Price thought that resistance was hopeless. The factory supervisor had seen how easily the aliens had crushed Earth's defenses. She believed that humanity's only chance for survival was to surrender and hope for mercy. Maybe the Zephyrians would let them live as slaves if they gave up peacefully. It would be better than extinction. Jake Morrison listened to both sides, but he kept his own thoughts private. The former ship captain had become the unofficial leader of New Haven, but he knew that his authority depended on the consent of the colonists. If he pushed them too hard in any direction, they might choose someone else to follow. For now, he focused on keeping everyone alive and working together. The breakthrough came when Shaw's research team successfully reverse-engineered a Zephyrian power cell. The alien device was no bigger than a human thumb, but it contained more energy than a fusion reactor. When they cracked it open, they found that it worked by tapping into quantum fluctuations in empty space itself. It was technology that was centuries beyond human understanding. But Shaw thought he could build crude copies using materials from the ancient ruins. Carl Bennett took Shaw's designs and turned them into working prototypes in his workshop. The old engineer had become New Haven's master builder over the past 5 years. He could make anything work, given enough time and spare parts. The quantum power cells he built were huge and unstable compared to the alien originals, but they worked. For the first time since Earth's fall, humans had access to the same kind of energy source that powered Zephyrian warships. The first test of the new technology came sooner than anyone expected. Amy Rodriguez was monitoring the colony's sensor network when she detected 3 ships approaching from deep space. The vessels were small and fast, and their energy signatures matched Zephyrian patrol craft. After 5 years of hiding, New Haven had finally been discovered. Jake called an emergency meeting of the Colony Council. Some members wanted to evacuate immediately. Others thought they should try to negotiate with the aliens. Hughes argued for making a stand and fighting back even though they were hopelessly outgunned. Lisa Turner worried about the children and what would happen to them if the colony was destroyed. Shaw spoke up with a proposal that shocked everyone. His team had been working on weapons based on the reverse-engineered alien technology. The devices were crude and dangerous, but they might be able to punch through Zephyrian shields. If they could surprise the patrol ships, they might have a chance. It would be the first time humans had fought back against the aliens with anything approaching equal weapons. Jake made the decision that would define New Haven's future. They would not run, and they would not surrender. They would fight. The colonists had spent 5 years learning to survive on this hostile world. Now, they would learn to fight for it too. Every man and woman who could hold a weapon was issued equipment from Bennett's workshops. Even the teachers and doctors took up arms to defend their new home. The Zephyrian ships came in low over the colony, expecting to find frightened refugees ready to be harvested. Instead, they met weapons fire that tore through their shields like they were made of paper. The aliens had never faced humans armed with quantum technology before. Their ships exploded in brilliant flashes of light as Shaw's improvised weapons found their marks. But the victory came at a cost. 2 of the experimental weapons overloaded during the battle, killing their operators. Several buildings were damaged by missed shots that carved craters in the ground. Worst of all, the aliens had certainly sent out a distress signal before they died. More ships would come, and they would be ready for a fight. As Jake stood in the smoking ruins of the colony's outer defenses, he realized that everything had changed. New Haven was no longer a hiding place. It was a fortress. The colonists were no longer refugees. They were warriors. The Zephyrians had taken their home, but they could not take their spirit. The real war was just beginning. News of New Haven's victory spread through hidden human settlements across the galaxy like wildfire. For 5 years, the survivors had lived in fear, believing that resistance was hopeless. Now they knew that humans could fight back and win. Jake Morrison found himself coordinating with colony ships and settlements he had not even known existed. The scattered remnants of humanity were finally starting to work together. Peter Hughes stood in the pilot briefing room aboard the modified cargo ship Defiance. The former Earth Defense Force pilot had become the leader of humanity's first strike squadron. His pilots were not the professional warriors of the old fleet. They were miners and mechanics and farmers who had learned to fly because someone had to. Their ships were cobbled together from salvaged parts and powered by Dr. Shaw's reverse-engineered quantum reactors. They looked ugly, but they could fight. The Defiance and her sister ships operated out of a hidden base in the asteroid field around a dead star. The Zephyrians had no interest in lifeless systems, so they rarely patrolled them. It made the perfect hiding spot for human raiders. Hughes had been launching attacks against alien supply convoys for 6 months now. Each successful strike brought back weapons and technology that could be studied and copied. Helen Price no longer talked about surrender. The former factory supervisor now ran the largest weapons production facility in human space. Her workshops were hidden deep inside a hollowed-out asteroid where they could not be detected by Zephyrian sensors. Hundreds of workers toiled around, the clock building ships and weapons for the growing resistance. They used alien technology combined with human ingenuity to create tools of war that neither species could have imagined alone. The breakthrough came when Dr. Shaw successfully integrated a human neural interface with a captured Zephyrian AI core. The alien artificial intelligence had been programmed to control ship systems, but Shaw found a way to make it respond to human thoughts instead. The result was a new type of fighter craft that could react as fast as its pilot could think. Shaw called them Fury-class interceptors, and they were unlike anything that had ever flown. Danny Clark tested the first Fury prototype in the rings of a gas giant far from any alien patrol routes. The young engineer had been a racing pilot before the war, and he understood how to push machines to their limits. The new fighter responded to his thoughts like it was an extension of his own body. When he imagined turning left, the ship turned. When he thought about firing weapons, the guns discharged automatically. It was like flying inside his own mind. But the neural interface came with risks. The connection between pilot and machine was so complete that damage to the ship could cause feedback that injured or killed the person flying it. Several test pilots died learning this lesson. Others survived, but were left with permanent nerve damage. Only volunteers with nothing left to lose were willing to take the chance of flying the new fighters. Nancy Green was one of those volunteers. She had lost her husband and children when the Zephyrians destroyed the Tau Ceti colonies. Now she lived only for revenge against the aliens who had taken everything from her. The neural link with her Fury fighter felt natural to her, like she had been born to fly this way. Other pilots said she could make the ship dance through space like it was performing ballet. The Resistance scored its first major victory when Hughes led a squadron of Fury fighters against a Zephyrian battlecruiser near the Vega system. The alien ship was escorting a convoy of supply vessels bound for the occupation forces in the core worlds. Intelligence reports said it was lightly defended and carrying critical components for alien shield generators. It was too tempting a target to pass up. The battle began when Hughes and his pilots emerged from hyperspace directly in the path of the convoy. The Zephyrian escort ship immediately moved to intercept them, expecting an easy victory against primitive human fighters. Instead, the aliens found themselves facing weapons that could penetrate their shields and ships that moved like living creatures. 3 escort vessels died in the first 30 seconds of combat, but the battlecruiser was a different challenge entirely. Its shields were 10 times stronger than the smaller ships, and its weapons could destroy a Fury fighter with a single hit. Nancy Green volunteered to make the attack run that would decide the battle. She pushed her ship's neural interface to maximum power and dove straight at the alien vessel, while enemy fire lit up the space around her. The quantum weapons aboard. Her fighter drew power directly from her nervous system as she fired. The pain was incredible, but she held her course until the battlecruiser's shields collapsed under the barrage. Then she pulled up hard and watched as Hughes and the other pilots finished off the crippled alien ship. The victory came at a cost, though. The neural feedback had damaged her brain and she would never fly again. Word of the battlecruiser's destruction reached every human settlement within weeks. Suddenly, resistance groups that had been hiding in remote systems began coordinating their attacks. The Zephyrians found themselves facing raids on supply lines they had thought were secure. Mining operations in asteroid belts came under attack from ships that appeared out of nowhere. Even heavily defended worlds started reporting mysterious explosions at military installations. Jake Morrison established his headquarters on a rogue planet drifting between star systems. The world had been ejected from its original solar system millions of years ago and now wandered alone in interstellar space. It was completely invisible to long-range sensors and could support a small population using geothermal power from its core. It became the secret capital of the human resistance, Amy Rodriguez worked from a communication center buried kilometers beneath the planet's frozen surface. She coordinated intelligence gathering from dozens of spy networks scattered across Zephyrian-occupied space. Human agents posing as refugees or slave workers reported on alien movements and weaknesses. The information they provided allowed resistance commanders to plan increasingly ambitious attacks. Dr. Shaw continued his research in laboratories that were even more advanced than the ones at New Haven. He had access to intact alien ships now, instead of just fragments. His team had learned to manufacture their own quantum power cells that were almost as efficient as the Zephyrian originals. More importantly, they had discovered a fundamental weakness in alien shield technology that could be exploited by human weapons. The Zephyrian response was swift and brutal. Fleet Commander Zix-9 deployed additional warships to hunt down the human rebels. Suspected resistance bases were bombarded from orbit without warning. Entire asteroid colonies were vaporized on the suspicion that they might be harboring human fighters. The aliens showed no mercy to anyone who might be helping the resistance. But for every base they destroyed, 2 more seemed to appear. For every human fighter they killed, 10 more volunteered to take their place. The resistance had become something the Zephyrians had never faced before. These were not professional soldiers fighting for pay or glory. These were survivors fighting for their species' right to exist. They could not be intimidated or bought off or reasoned with. They would fight until they won or until they died trying. Jake Morrison stood before a holographic display showing the current state of the war. Red dots marked known Zephyrian positions while blue indicators showed human settlements and bases. The map looked hopeless at first glance. The aliens still controlled most of inhabited space, and their fleets were vastly superior to anything the resistance could field. But Jake could see something the enemy could not. The red dots were starting to flicker as alien positions came under attack. The blue dots were multiplying as more humans joined the fight. Slowly but surely the balance was starting to shift. The resistance had grown into something that could no longer be ignored. Jake Morrison commanded a fleet of over 300 ships scattered across dozens of hidden bases. They were not the sleek warships of old Earth, but they were deadly in their own way. Each vessel was unique, built from whatever materials could be found and powered by technology that mixed human engineering with alien science. The crews who flew them had learned to fight in ways that no military academy had ever taught. Danny Clark led his infiltration team through the maintenance shafts of Zephyrian Station Omega-7. The facility orbited a gas giant in the Rigel system and served as a major supply depot for alien forces in this sector. Clark and his people had spent 2 months planning this raid. They had studied patrol schedules and guard rotations and found weaknesses in the station's security systems. Now they were inside the belly of the beast, planting explosives that would cripple the enemy's logistics network. The team moved like ghosts through corridors filled with alien technology. Clark had trained them well in the art of stealth warfare. They knew how to avoid Zephyrian sensors and how to kill guards silently when avoidance was not possible. Each member carried weapons designed by Dr. Shaw's research teams that could punch through alien armor without making a sound. They also carried neural scramblers that could disable Zephyrian communications gear with a focused electromagnetic pulse. Back on the rogue planet headquarters, Dr. Shaw made a discovery that would change the course of the war. While studying the quantum field generators that powered Zephyrian shields, he found something unexpected. The alien devices used a specific frequency of quantum energy that resonated with certain biological processes. It was this resonance that made their weapons so deadly to organic life. But Shaw realized that the same principle could be turned against them. Working with his team of scientists and engineers, Shaw developed what he called spirit bombs. These weapons drew power directly from the user's life force and converted it into quantum energy. The process was dangerous and could kill anyone who used them carelessly, but a skilled operator could channel their own biological energy into a weapon capable of overwhelming any Zephyrian defense. It was like turning human determination itself into a destructive force. Nancy Green volunteered to test the first spirit bomb prototype, even though her brain was still healing from her previous neural interface injuries. The weapon looked like a simple metal cylinder, but Shaw warned her that using it would feel like setting her nervous system on fire. She strapped the device to her fighter's weapon mount and launched against a derelict alien cruiser that served as a target drone. The moment she activated the spirit bomb, Nancy felt like lightning was flowing through her veins. The weapon drew energy from every cell in her body and focused it into a beam of pure quantum destruction. The derelict cruiser's shields collapsed instantly, and its hull simply ceased to exist where the beam touched it. When the firing stopped, Nancy was unconscious from the strain, but she had proven that human willpower could overcome alien technology. News of the successful test spread through the resistance like wildfire. Volunteers lined up to be fitted with spirit bomb systems even though they knew the risks. These were people who had lost everything to the Zephyrian invasion and were willing to sacrifice their lives for a chance at revenge. Helen Price's factories worked overtime to produce the new weapons while Shaw's teams trained pilots in their proper use. The first combat deployment came when Peter Hughes led a strike against the Zephyrian fortress world of Kepler Prime. The Phi planet served as the regional headquarters for Fleet Commander Zix-9 and was defended by an entire battle fleet. It was the kind of target that would have been impossible to attack just a year earlier. But Hughes had 12 pilots equipped with spirit bombs and the determination to use them no matter what the cost. The attack began at dawn, when the human ships emerged from hyperspace directly above Kepler Prime's North Pole. The Zephyrian defenders scrambled to respond, but they were caught completely off guard. Hughes had chosen the timing perfectly during a shift change when half the orbital defense platforms were powered down for maintenance. Even so, the aliens had enough firepower to destroy the human force 10 times over. But they had never faced weapons powered by human desperation before. One by one, Hughes pilots ignited their spirit bombs and dove at the alien battle stations. The quantum energy tore through shields that had never been breached by conventional weapons. Defense platforms that had stood guard for decades were reduced to glowing debris in seconds. Each attack cost the human pilot their life, but they died, knowing they had struck a blow that the enemy would never forget. Hughes himself saved the Fortress Command Center for last. He flew his fighter straight down through the planet's atmosphere while enemy interceptors swarmed around him. His ship took hit after hit, but he held his course until he could see the massive complex that housed Zix-9's headquarters. Then he triggered his spirit bomb and channeled every ounce of his hatred for the aliens into the weapon's quantum matrix. The explosion could be seen from orbit. The command center simply vanished along with everything within a 5-kilometer radius. Fleet Commander Zix-9 died in that blast, along with his entire command staff. The Zephyrian response to the attack was immediate and vicious, but it was also uncoordinated. Without their central command structure, the alien forces in this sector began making mistakes that the resistance was quick to exploit. Jake Morrison watched the recordings of Hughes's final attack with mixed emotions. The loss of a skilled commander and 12 brave pilots hurt badly, but the strategic victory was undeniable. Kepler Prime had been the nerve center for Zephyrian operations in this part of the galaxy. Its destruction would disrupt enemy activities for months while they tried to rebuild their command structure. More importantly, the attack had proven that humans could strike at the heart of alien power. Resistance cells across occupied space began planning similar raids against high-value targets. The spirit bomb technology was still dangerous and often fatal to use, but volunteers kept stepping forward. They came from every human settlement that had survived the invasion. Teachers and farmers and mechanics who had never thought they would become warriors found themselves preparing for suicide missions against impossible odds. Maria Santos established a new training facility on an airless moon where potential spirit bomb operators could learn to use the weapons safely. The process was part meditation and part torture, as volunteers learned to channel their life force without burning themselves out. Many candidates washed out or died during training, but those who succeeded became humanity's most dangerous weapons. They called themselves the Spirit Guard, and they wore the title with grim pride. Amy Rodriguez coordinated intelligence networks that now spanned half the galaxy. Her agents reported increasing confusion in Zephyrian command structures as more regional headquarters fell to human attacks. The aliens were being forced to spread their forces thin, trying to defend facilities they had once considered invulnerable. Supply lines that had operated safely for years were now under constant threat from human raiders. Carl Bennett worked with Helen Price to establish new production facilities in star systems the Zephyrians had written off as uninhabitable. Desert, worlds with barely breathable atmospheres, became manufacturing centers for human weapons. Ice moons orbiting gas giants were hollowed out to create shipyards where ugly but effective warships took shape. The Resistance was no longer dependent on a few hidden bases that could be destroyed by a lucky alien patrol. Dr. Shaw made another breakthrough when he learned to mass-produce neural interface systems that were almost as safe as traditional controls. The new generation of Fury fighters could be flown by ordinary pilots without the risk of brain damage that had plagued earlier models. This meant that the Resistance could field larger squadrons of advanced fighters without constantly training. Replacement pilots. As the second year of active rebellion drew to a close, Jake Morrison realized that something fundamental had changed. The humans were no longer just fighting for survival. They were fighting to win. The scattered refugees who had fled Earth's destruction had become a force that even the mighty Zephyrian Empire had to take seriously. They had learned to turn their pain into strength and their desperation into weapons that could shake the foundations of alien power. The war was far from over, but for the first time since Earth's fall, Jake Morrison allowed himself to believe that humanity might actually have a chance. The time for hiding was over. Jake Morrison stood before the largest gathering of human ships since the fall of Earth. 500 vessels hung in the darkness between the stars, representing every colony settlement and resistance cell that had survived the long years of war. They came from ice worlds and desert planets, from asteroid mines and deep space habitats. Each ship carried volunteers who had chosen to risk everything for one final throw of the dice. The target was Kepler Prime itself, the heart of Zephyrian power in this sector of the galaxy. The planet had been rebuilt since Hughes's devastating attack 2 years earlier. New defense platforms ringed the world in layers of overlapping fire zones. The orbital shipyards had been expanded and reinforced. Most importantly, the aliens had learned from their defeat and were ready for anything the humans might try. Admiral Morrison, as the other commanders now called him, knew that this battle would decide humanity's future. If they won, Kepler Prime would become the first world liberated from alien rule since the war began. It would prove to the galaxy that the Zephyrian Empire could be beaten and might inspire other enslaved races to rise up in rebellion. If they lost, the Resistance would be finished and humanity would face extinction. Amy Rodriguez worked frantically in the communications center of the command ship New Earth. She was coordinating with resistance cells throughout the galaxy to launch simultaneous attacks on Zephyrian installations. The goal was to prevent enemy reinforcements from reaching Kepler Prime during the battle. Every supply depot, communications relay, and fuel station within 100 light-years was about to come under assault by human forces. Dr. Shaw had spent the past 6 months developing new weapons specifically for this assault. His latest creation was called a quantum storm generator, a device that could disrupt the energy fields that held Zephyrian battle formations together. The technology was based on observations of natural phenomena in the nebula, where humanity's secret capital was hidden. Shaw had learned to weaponize the same forces that made hyperspace travel possible. Danny Clark led the advance force that would clear a path for the main assault. His infiltration specialists had been inserted onto Kepler Prime weeks earlier, using captured alien transport ships. They were scattered across the planet's surface in small teams, waiting for the signal to begin their sabotage missions. Their job was to knock out ground-based defense systems and create chaos in the enemy rear areas. The Spirit Guard had evolved since Nancy Green's first desperate attack runs. Maria Santos now commanded over 200 pilots who had mastered the art of channeling their life force into destructive energy. They no longer needed to sacrifice themselves to use their weapons effectively. Through years of training and meditation, they had learned to draw power from their determination rather than their physical bodies. They were still risking their lives every time they fought, but they could survive to fight again. Helen Price had moved her entire industrial operation to support this one battle. Her factories had been working around the clock for months, producing ammunition, fuel, and spare parts for the assault fleet. Every ship in the human force carried weapons that bore her mark. She had even developed new types of armor that could absorb some of the energy from Zephyrian weapons and feed it back into the ship's own power systems. Carl Bennett commanded the engineering corps that kept the human fleet operational. His teams had performed miracles of improvisation and repair to get this many ships ready for combat at the same time. Some of the vessels in the fleet were held together with little more than determination and welding compound. But Bennett's people had a gift for making impossible things work when they were needed most. The battle began when the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation around Kepler Prime. The Zephyrians had been expecting an attack, but not on this scale. Their sensors showed more human ships than intelligence reports claimed existed in the entire galaxy. For the first time since the war began, the aliens found themselves outnumbered by their former victims. Fleet Admiral Quix 12 had replaced his predecessor after the destruction of the first command center. He was considered one of the most capable military minds in the Zephyrian Empire, and had been sent specifically to crush the human rebellion once and for all. But even he was shocked by the size of the force that had appeared in his system. His battle computers calculated that the humans had committed every ship they possessed to this single attack. The opening phase of the battle went exactly as Morrison had planned. Shaw's quantum storm generators disrupted the carefully coordinated Zephyrian defense grid, turning their overlapping fire zones into chaos. Clark's sabotage team struck at the ground-based installations, causing explosions that could be seen from orbit. The Spirit Guard, led by Santos, carved through enemy fighter squadrons like they were made of paper. But the aliens were not helpless. Their individual ships were still superior to anything the humans could build, and they had the advantages of prepared positions and familiar territory. As the initial shock of the surprise attack wore off, Quix 12 began to rally his forces and mount a coordinated response. The space around Kepler Prime became a hurricane of energy beams, missile salvos, and exploding ships. Bob Williams manned the main gun turret of the assault ship, Liberty's Revenge. The grizzled veteran had served on the original Liberty during the evacuation from Earth and had been fighting Zephyrians ever since. His targeting computer was damaged by enemy fire, but he continued to aim and fire manually, even as the ship shuddered under the impact of alien weapons. Every shot he made counted because ammunition was precious, and there would be no resupply during this battle. Tracy Morgan kept the communication networks functioning even as relay stations were destroyed around her. She had been Jake Morrison's communications officer since the early days of the Resistance, and she understood how critical coordination was to their battle plan. Blood ran down her face from a head wound, but she continued to relay orders and status reports between the scattered human squadrons. The turning point came when Morrison made a decision that shocked both sides. Instead of trying to match the aliens in a conventional fleet engagement, he ordered his ships to ram the enemy formation. It was a tactic that no sane military commander would ever consider, but Morrison was no longer bound by conventional thinking. His people were fighting for their species' survival, and normal rules did not apply. One by one, human ships drove themselves into Zephyrian vessels, trading their lives for the chance to cause maximum damage to the enemy. The aliens had never faced opponents willing to sacrifice everything for victory. Their tactical computers could not process the idea of deliberately ramming an enemy ship when other options were available. The psychological impact was as devastating as the physical destruction. Santos led the final assault on the planetary fortress that housed the new alien command center. Her Spirit Guard pilots had learned to work together, linking their life forces into a collective weapon that was greater than the sum of its parts. The quantum energy they generated tore through every defense the Zephyrians could deploy. The fortress walls simply ceased to exist where the spirit-powered beams struck them. Fleet Admiral Quix 12 died in his command bunker, still trying to understand how the inferior humans had defeated his superior forces. His last transmission to the Zephyrian High Command was a warning that humanity had become something far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. They were no longer refugees or rebels. They had become a force that could threaten the Empire itself. When the battle ended, human ships controlled the space around Kepler Prime for the first time since the planet's construction. The cost had been terrible, with nearly half the assault, fleet destroyed or crippled, but they had won a victory that would be remembered for as long as humans existed. The liberation of their first world since Earth's fall proved that the Zephyrian Empire was not invincible. Jake Morrison stood on the surface of Kepler Prime watching human children play in the streets that had been alien territory just hours before. These were kids who had been born in exile and had never seen a free human world. Now they ran and laughed under an alien sun, while their parents worked to build a new society from the ruins of the old. The war was far from over. The Zephyrian Empire spanned thousands of worlds and commanded resources that dwarfed anything humanity could field. But something fundamental had changed in the balance of power. The aliens now knew that humans would never surrender, no matter how hopeless the odds became. They had taken humanity's home, but they could never take the spirit that burned in every human heart. As the twin suns of Kepler Prime set behind the mountains, Morrison thought about the long road that had brought them to this moment. From the ashes of Earth to the hidden colonies to the secret bases where the resistance was born, humanity had refused to quit. They had learned that their greatest weapon was not technology or numbers, but the simple refusal to accept defeat. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in years it held hope. Humanity had proven that they could fight back and win. Other worlds would be liberated and other victories would follow. The Zephyrians had made a fatal mistake when they chose genocide over conquest.